Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here, and welcome back to my channel and one of the last islands of sanity in our ever-maddening world. Over the last 3 years, we've talked a lot about the contemporary left through the lens of the issue of the week. Free speech, abortion, transgenderism, critical race theory, you guys know the drill. But we haven't actually sat down and talked about what the contemporary left actually is. What is essentially the left? What is its essence? What is its nature? What makes the left today actually the left? It's a question that honestly not too many people have tackled, with not altogether bad reasons. In our present circumstance of 24/7 news cycles where the outrage du week has become the outrage du jour, which has now become the outrage du hour, depending on how much time you spend on social media and news sites, and where the rule has become content ever more content, a philosophical discussion about the essence of the left isn't exactly one that makes people itch to follow links and press like buttons. However, I would argue that it is essential to actually know the nature of the left, because only when you know what and who your enemy is can you actually create a strategy to defeat him completely and utterly. Not to say that courageous commentators and pugilistic pundits haven't reached for some sort of answer to that question. The Molotov explanation usually lobbed at said question is communism and or radical socialism, an answer and an explanation so cliched by now that you can practically play a drinking game with it. Now, on the surface, this does make sense. The only real substantial philosophical battle that the United States has had, at least openly, was with communism. For over 50 years, communism was the existential threat. So it makes perfect sense why people would actually see the conflicts and the fights of today through the lens of those still fresh memories. And to be honest, it doesn't hurt that we won the Cold War, giving the whole thing an aurora of
we did it before and we can do it again, and we will do it again.
But the cold hard truth, gang, is that it's all bosh. Communism, essentially, is not about state ownership and control of the economy and everything else. There were economic systems before the publication of Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto that basically did the same thing. A big example would be mercantilism, the primary economic system of the 17th and 18th centuries, wherein exports were maximized and imports were minimized. The way this was manifested was usually like this. Colonial European powers, such as Britain, France, Spain, and Holland, decided that all of the natural resources within the mother country and within her colonies were the property of said mother country. Her colonists in said faraway colonies would harvest these natural products, these natural resources, whatever they were, and would then ship them to the mother country, where they would then become merchandisable products. Lumber would become furniture, furs would become clothes, gold would become jewelry, etc., etc. The mother country would then resell these finished products to the entire world, her colonies included. Now, whether you're a fan of mercantilism or not, it's not communism. The real defining mark of communism was the quasi-religious belief in the inevitable global revolution of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, which would usher in the classless, i.e. perfect utopia, that we've all been longing for, whether we realize we've been longing for it or not. And this foundational marker led to another cornerstone of communism, the idea that economics was the only legitimate lens through which to see history, culture, politics, and generally the entire world. The contemporary left lacks both of these hallmarks. The contemporary American left lacks both of these hallmarks. It doesn't believe in the inevitable global revolution of class against class because there is no class in the Marxian sense anymore. Antifa and BLM hooligans are in entirely different strata than, say, Ibram Kendi and Dan Peralta, who are themselves in completely different strata from Jeff Bezos or thoroughly modern Millie.
But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand, and I want to understand white rage, and I'm white.
And yet, at the same time that they all belong in different stratas, they are all nonetheless united in a firm, vice-like ideology. No, we can't say that race now forms the contours of a new class structure, because the left, honestly and truly, doesn't even really believe in race anymore, surprising as that sounds. When Nicole Hannah-Jones starts blathering on about the dichotomy between being racially black and politically black, and when the Washington Post actually runs an opinion piece in which it talks about the dangers of multiracial whiteness, race itself has been politicized out of existence, becoming now simply a chameleon term to be used as an ideological weapon. What the contemporary American left most closely resembles today is a religion. An observation which I admit is not at all original to me, since for years conservative commentators have been making the point that in the way it moves, acts, and thinks, the contemporary left is much more akin to a religion than to a political movement or even to a philosophy. Unoriginal though it may be, this observation is now pretty uncontroversial to anyone who has eyes to see and ears to hear. For example, making one of the basic tenets of your movement the idea, the statement that yes indeed, a man can in fact become a woman, the whole trans women are women, requires a faith in something separate and superior to biology, anatomy, genetics, metaphysics, and even plain old common sense. And it's not just with transgenderism. You can see this phenomenon manifest in other ways. For example, it is by now crystal and painfully clear that there was no collaboration between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin in 2015 and 2016. The only piece of evidence tying the two parties together, the Steele dossier, has been proven to have been a hit piece paid for by the Clinton campaign. As the icing on the cake in that regard, in April of 2017, Christopher Steele himself swore under oath that most of the claims that he himself made in that dossier were quote-unquote unverified. And yet, the belief that Trump was a puppet of Putin is now so firmly established and accepted by the members of the contemporary left that to actually put yourself in opposition to that belief is to out yourself as a supposed enemy of democracy. The firm belief that Trump was the Manchurian candidate of the 21st century completely trumps all of the facts that irrefutably say that he wasn't. But here is where things get dicey, gang, because now the question inevitably becomes, what sort of religion is the left today? Is it a heresy of Christianity? Is it an ideology akin, close cousin to Marxism or Hegelianism? Is it something completely new under the sun, the sacralization and deification of politics itself? The answer might be rather surprising because it's none of those. Instead, the answer is Gnosticism. If anyone recognized that word, first of all, give yourself a gold star, you've earned it. Second of all, you're probably equating that word with some of the earliest heresies in Christian history. But it's important to remember right now up front that those are not fundamentally what Gnosticism is. Gnosticism predates Christianity, meaning that leftism, contemporary American leftism, is not a heresy of Christianity. It is not something new under the sun either. It is instead simply the latest manifestation of something that is incredibly old. To really understand what Gnosticism truly is, we have to mine the mind of one of the most criminally forgotten thinkers of the 20th century, a guy by the name of Eric Voegelin. Voegelin was a genius. That's really the only word to describe him, even though I know that that word is thrown about all too carelessly today. But in Voegelin's case, that is probably an undercredit to him. This man earned his doctorate degree in philosophy at the age of 20 from the University of Vienna. And then, after he actually had earned his doctorate, didn't just settle down to a teaching position somewhere in Europe. No, then he studied with the greatest minds of his time in Oxford, in Harvard, in Columbia, so that by the time he was 25, 26, he had done the equivalent work of 2 more doctorate degrees. But what made him a bona fide genius wasn't just that he had earned his doctorate at 20, wasn't just that he had done extra work so that before he was 30 he basically held 3 doctorates. No, what made him a real genius was that he was able to blend the things that he learned together. He didn't simply concentrate in philosophy, didn't simply concentrate in history, didn't simply concentrate in mythology. By the by, one of his big ideas was that all societies, at their nucleus, are formed around a mythology. No, what Voegelin was able to do, and successfully I might add, was to actually cross-pollinate these fields together. The biggest testimony to his success in this regard is his 5-volume work, Order and History. The first volume, of which I have just ordered, runs at more than 500 pages long. For Voegelin, Gnosticism, at its core, was the desire to overturn the order of being. The idea, or I should say the reality, actually, that there is a transcendental structure to the cosmos, from God down to the earthworms, and even further down to quarks and all the other weird, wonderful stuff that quantum mechanics is discovering. Furthermore, all of these different hierarchies of being are interrelated. None are islands in and of themselves. It is the role, business, and in fact duty of philosophers, Voegelin would say especially the intellectual descendants of Plato and Aristotle, to discover and map out the order of being, especially how the different hierarchies are interrelated, and especially what man's place is within this transcendental structure of the cosmos, which in and of itself can only be answered by discovering what man himself is. Voegelin argues that it is through what he calls the opening of the soul, by experiences of genuine love and wonder, that we not only instinctively know that such an order of being exists, but that is also the way by which we take our first steps into actually discovering it and mapping it out. In the experiences of love for the world-transcendent origin of being, in philia, toward the soph and the wise, in eros, toward the agathon, the good, and the kalon, the beautiful, man became philosopher. From these experiences arose the image of the order of being. At the opening of the soul, the order of being becomes visible even to its ground and origin in the beyond, in the Platonic epikena, in which the soul participates as it suffers and achieves its opening. Gnosticism, contrary to philosophy, wants to overturn the order of being, basically wants to recreate it from scratch. And the desire to do this, Voegelin says, comes from the very natural and very human awareness that we do not live in a perfect world, that we live in a world that is ravaged by evil. It's an obvious observation to make. All you have to do is open up the news app on your phone to see this. But Voegelin says that this awareness can permanently shatter one's peace and faith if he actually allows it to consume his mind. The answer is because of all the questions that this awareness raises. Why is evil allowed to be in the world? What is the source and cause of evil? How can there be such a thing as a just good God when, for example, little boys are allowed to be raped by warlords in Afghanistan, helped by the Viagra given to them by the United States government, FYI? These questions can make people conclude that the reason why evil exists in the first place is because the world, the cosmos itself, is poorly organized. If only there was a revolutionary change enacted in human nature itself, evil itself could be eradicated. In other words, perfection is entirely possible this side of the grave. All we have to do to achieve it is to implement a particular program to make that dream a reality. Human action will create utopia. Sound familiar? All we have to do is legalize gay marriage. All we have to do is implement a Green New Deal. All we have to do is mandate anti-racist curriculum in kindergarten classes. All we have to do is remove all the reminders that people who thought differently from us ever existed, and paradise will be ours.
This flame will burn away the darkness, burn you the way to paradise!
This itself leads to other completely logical consequences. For one thing, it leads to the death of God. God has to die because he is the creator and the preserver of the order of being. God must be killed so that man quite literally can become God himself. And man has to become God so that his campaign to create heaven here on earth through his particular program can actually succeed. Gnostics may speak about God, reference God, as actually many leftists, particularly of the Christian left variety, do, but it isn't the God as he is. When the current occupant of the White House, to give one example, says on the one hand that he is a devout practicing Catholic, and then on the other hand says that abortion is a fundamental right, he's not actually making a contradiction. It's just that his God is not the God of Catholicism or of Christianity in general. His Catholicism is not the Catholicism that has been around for the last 2,000 years. As part of the Gnostic vanguard, Joe Biden has literally recreated what Catholicism means and has recreated what God is within that recreation of Catholicism so that he can be perfectly devout and at the same time saying that an abortion is no different than blowing your nose. For another thing, the asking of questions must be completely prohibited, a mark that will be very familiar to us living in a world where Twitter completely muzzled the continuously oldest published newspaper in America to keep it from spreading a story that was potentially quite damaging to the Biden campaign, and where social media giants such as Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram have kicked off private citizens for simply glitching the narrative. Now, the reason why questions are completely prohibited is because of one of the key aspects of Gnosticism: the great lie. Every manifestation of Gnosticism depends on ignoring and completely covering a key fundamental aspect of reality. For Thomas Hobbes, the 17th century English philosopher, it was the summum bonum, the highest good around which a civilization and a society is organized. For Hegel, the 19th century German philosopher, it was the fact that history cannot, by its very nature, be 100% knowable to us in the present. For Marx, it was the fact that economics cannot, by its very nature, be the sole and entire prism through which we see all of human activity and history. For contemporary leftism, it might be that personal identity is not something that can be simply created out of whole cloth by the subject himself out of his desires and feelings of the day. These key aspects of reality have to be ignored, because if they aren't, then whatever manifestation of Gnosticism is present at that moment is DOA. Take Marxism just as one example. If economics is not the sole arbitrator and interpreter of the whole spectrum of human activity, then communism itself cannot work. It's actually inconceivable, since without that pure prism of economics, then the worldwide revolution of the proletariat against the bourgeoisie because of economic disparity and injustice cannot happen. There are more things in heaven and earth than simply economics, meaning that a global revolution based purely around economics is inconceivable. Questions are the pinpoints through which the light of reality actually makes itself known. As such, those questions have to be immediately clamped down on and the questioners punished so that the entire edifice does not come crashing down to the ground. This is also why, incidentally, doing something as seemingly innocent as asking questions can today make you a quote-unquote enemy of democracy. It's not necessarily that you're asking piercing questions. It's simply that by the very fact of asking questions, you are questioning the narrative. You are questioning the quest for utopia. In essence, going back to what we said about man replacing God, you are questioning God. Gnosticism also explains why the left has actually been as successful as it has been to this point. When you are a quasi-religious movement whose ultimate goal is heaven here on earth, then you have everything to gain and everything to lose. As such, you will do everything in your power to win. You're not going to be stopped by rules, norms, or the niceties of civilized society. Also, you have actually something in which to fan the flames in the hearts, the bellies, and the minds of your followers. You take them from being simple spectators and make them literally activists. You can get them to burn down cities with your vision.
Burn you the way to paradise!
But all is not doom and gloom, gang. The key to defeating Gnosticism lies in its own makeup, as again Eric Voegelin pointed out. Voegelin said that reality is unchangeable outside of divine hands. As such, Gnostics cannot change reality. For all the victories that the left has gained, it has not changed what reality actually is. All it has done is create a facade between us and reality. And that facade can so easily be burned away, gang. The trick, however, is how you go about doing it. If you try to set that fire through facts, syllogisms, facts don't care about your feelings, you might as well be trying to set fire to the Great Wall of China. However, if you approach it on the field of religion, as one religion fighting another religion, then the odds move in your favor. And before we go, gang, it is time for...
So always look for the silver lining and try to find the sunny side of life.
And this week's silver lining, apropos enough, is this little book by our man of the hour, Eric Voegelin, Science, Politics, and Gnosticism, which is actually the book that I use to base this video on. So if you actually want to dive deeper into the nature of Gnosticism, how it works, how its apostles actually think, I cannot recommend this book highly enough. This was less than $20 on Amazon. I will have a link in the description box below to this book. Read it to really understand the nature of the enemy that we face today. You are not going to regret it. Well, that about wraps up everything for now, gang. As always, if you liked the video, whether you agreed with me or not, don't forget to show your support by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, and sharing it with your friends on social media. And if you like videos about politics, religion, and culture from a unique POV, then don't forget to subscribe, ring that bell like Quasimodo, so that you will never be left out of the loop when I post new videos here on the channel that you're not going to want to miss. As always, thank you for watching, for giving me a bit of your time and day. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. I appreciate every single one of you. And until next time, gang, stay safe and stay free by daring to read, think, speak, and write, and ask questions in the pursuit of truth. I'll chat at you next time. Ciao.